Hey everybody, it's Chris Wyden, the founder of Royal Table, and I have a really amazing guest today. He's a good friend of mine, has been a friend of mine for a long time. Todd Stottlemyre played 15 years in the major leagues and was on a World Series team three times, winners, World Series winners three times. And maybe if we're lucky, he can maybe show us one of those rings, although I doubt he wears them. I've seen those things and they're big on your hand. Not something you take out for everyday wear unless you're Shaquille O'Neal and it looks like a pinky ring. But Todd's an amazing guy, great business guy after he got out of baseball and lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Todd, thanks for joining the Royal Table.
Well, every day I get to hang out with you, Chris, is a great day.
I know
So
we have a lot of fun together. We're two
this
peas in
is
a
great.
pod.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
So,
it's funny because, you text me all the time with baseball trivia, and I'm
yeah.
like, and I always text you back. I'm like, Chris, you know about more about baseball than I do.
But my favorite thing I've ever sent to you is that time the guy charged you off the plate and you came off the mound and let him
Yeah.
know who's boss. So, no, you're a great guy and glad to have you part of the Royal Table. So tell us, let's leave faith out of it at this point, and let's just talk about your life story. What's your life story? Because you have an amazing life story, not just from what you've done personally, but the people you've been around, including first and foremost your family. So tell us your life story.
Yeah. So, from basically from the time I could walk, Yankee Stadium was my playground, and my father was a pitcher for the New York Yankees from '64 to the mid '70s, and in that time frame, he had some pretty extraordinary teammates. Mickey Mantle was his teammate for a handful of years. Roger Maris, Whitey Ford. Matter of fact, Yogi Berra was actually his first manager, and Yogi became just an extraordinary friend of the family. And it's crazy because my 40th birthday, I celebrated with Yogi Berra. He was turning 80 at the
Mm,
time, and we did a combination birthday party in Montclair, New Jersey. And
wow.
at that party it was crazy because it was surrounded around a golf tournament that my father was running. So all of the storied Yankees were there to celebrate it. And I got to tell you, this was after my baseball career, but I was still in awe. Me and Yogi sat next to one another, and I mean it was just crazy. But growing up, every home game was like we would put our Yankee uniforms on and we travel across the George Washington Bridge into the Bronx at a historic place called Yankee Stadium, and we roamed the grounds. I
And you
say
put your
monkey.
flak jacket on before you went into the Bronx?
Oh yeah.
Because Yankee Stadium, the old one, was in a bad part of town.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. But it was crazy because Monument Park was like our monkey bars. This was our playground, and we were ballpark rats. But when I look back on those times, it's pretty extraordinary because basically as a kid you inherit your parents, friends and this and that, and then kind of later on your parents inherit, the kids when they become friends with someone, they inherit their parents as friends. But this was in a time when basically I was inheriting my father's teammates as friends and family friends. And when I look back and I look around, I grew up in a place and I grew up around people where everyone had lived out their dream.
Mm.
Like no one had failed on their dream. And it was pretty crazy when I kind of step back and think about it because, at the time that they're living out their dream, my dream is now kind of being launched. And my dream was, I look around and I was like, I want to do what my dad does. I want to play Major League Baseball. I want to play a game. And not one time, literally growing up, was like, did I think it wasn't possible? And I
So
think
that's
that that was
interesting to me
instilled in
because
me.
it's almost like what you saw became your standard.
Yeah. I
Like
mean, it's
when my
kind of,
son went for his first job, the owner of the company, big national mattress company, happened to be in town and he sat in on the interview.
mm,
And he asked my son, if you hit 50% of your goals, you'll make 50,000. If you hit 80% of your goals, you make 80,000. If you hit 100% of your goals, you make 100,000. If you hit 120% of your goals, you make 120. Which one would you like? And my son laughed at him. And he goes, "You think that's funny?" And he goes, "Oh, is that a serious question?" And he goes, "It is a serious question." And he said, does he said, well, the 120. And then he leaned in, he goes, does anybody ever answer anything else?
Right.
And the guy chuckled and they said, we'll let you know in a couple weeks. Well, 20 minutes into his ride back home, they called and they said, the owner loves you. You're hired. Well, he got home and he said to me, why would anybody answer anything else? And I
Yeah.
said, because some of those kids that go in there for that job, they've never met a single person who makes $100,000 a year or more.
Right.
You hang around all my friends,
Yeah.
most of whom are far richer than I am and make far more money than I do. So your standard of what you thought was normal, but it was at a subconscious level, and that's probably what you got.
Yeah, you carry your story, right? And the stories, a lot of times our stories are how we grow up, our environments, and this and that. And it's like, I look back on, what story was I carrying, into adulthood? I was carrying a story that everything was possible.
Yeah.
I was carrying, a story that didn't care about the odds and percentages of things happening. I actually never even paid attention to them, right? So I was like from a very little guy, I was on a mission. But speaking of stories and speaking of subconscious, which is, it's pretty crazy because, and when I was going through certain things in my life, I didn't understand the difference between a conscious and a subconscious. It wasn't a part of my lingo or conversation, but it led to that childhood, being able to live out my childhood dream and play Major League Baseball and but I had a major pivot that happened right after the 1993 World Series. And we won the World Series in 1992 with the Blue Jays and then 1993. And but it was about a week after that World Series, I got home and I'm staring at the ceiling one night and I'm like, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And what I meant was I was sick and tired of landing in the same place emotionally where things
Mm.
were bothering me. And when I looked at my life and my career at that time, I wasn't coming even close to being as good as I could be consistently on a major league field. More importantly, I was looking at my life off the field and they were mirroring one another. And so I reached out to a guy by the name of Harvey Dorfman. He wrote The Mental Game of Baseball, Mental Game of Pitching. He was the guru of psychology and mental toughness for Major League Baseball at the time. And I'll never forget, I reached out to him and I said, Harvey, this is Todd Stottlemyre. And he says, man, I've been waiting on your call. And I was like, I had
Did you know
no
him at this
idea.
point?
Huh?
Did you know him at this point?
I'd never met him in my life in
So he's
person.
watching you play, going, I wish this dude would call me.
Yeah, and he was probably like, man, this guy is a train wreck out there. And when I called him, and I was kind of like, that was strange. I had no idea this guy even knew who I was. But we booked a 2 hour meeting on the east coast of Florida after the 93 season, pre 94 season. And in the first 30 minutes, Harvey looked at me and he says, I got a question for you, Todd. And I said, okay, go ahead. And I was excited to be there. And this is important. Why? Because I wanted change. I wanted to get better. I wanted to become more. I wanted to be a better person. I wanted to be a better athlete on the field. All of these things.
Which is
I
crazy because you just won 2 World Series as a starting pitcher
exactly.
in the major leagues.
And it's crazy because at that moment in time, if you'd have looked at my life from the outside, okay, his father was a legendary pitcher for the New York Yankees, a three-time 20 game winner, a five-time All-Star. Let me see,
Now
five-time
has a
world
statue
champion.
of him at Yankee Stadium.
It's crazy, right? And then now I'm living out my dream, making millions of dollars playing on world championship teams. But it literally, what it looked like from the outside, that this guy's got it all, where it looked like I was at my top. The problem was when I stared in the mirror, I couldn't
Mm,
stand the guy staring back at me
mm.
because it really led to that question. When Harvey said, would you do it again? And I said, do what? He said, would you give that bone marrow transplant to your little brother again?
Mm.
Now it was 12 years had passed. But in that 12-year window, and I said to Harvey, I do it every second, every minute of every hour of every day. And he says, why? I couldn't come up with a good answer.
Tell the story because you skipped over the bone
And
marrow
I, yeah, and I
transplant.
will. And he said, well, and I remember I couldn't come up with a great answer. And Harvey says, "Didn't you already do it?" And I said, "Yeah." "Did you do everything you could do?" I said, "I think so." He says, "Well, man, it's time to forgive this thing and let it go." And then he said to me something I'll never forget in my life. He said, "Todd, you're not God."
Mm.
And I'm like, wow. And but 12 years prior to that, I'd given my little brother a bone marrow transplant. I was the selected family member. Our blood was the closest. Ultimately, my marrow put my little brother into a coma that took his life. It was in March of 81. I stood over his bed. I was watching him turn colors. He had taken his last breath. And, for a family, obviously traditional sadness. I mean, my little brother's death took our family to our knees. And my mom and dad had to bury their 11-year-old son. And I know we're not the only ones with that tragedy. I know it's everywhere, and a lot of people have that story. But I was creating a different story as a 15-year-old boy. And the story I was creating, that was my fault. I was taking the blame. It was my marrow. So I had sadness, I had guilt, and I had hate and anger that was running through my veins and I had a hard time looking at my mom and dad in the eyes because I had so much guilt. Well, mom and dad, of course, come to their son's rescue and they like, "Todd, you did everything you could do." The doctors were like, "It's not your fault. You did everything you could do." And that sounds great, but I'm a 15-year-old boy with a mind of my own that is going rinse and repeat. If it wasn't for me, he would be here. And I continually played that story in my mind with emotions, by the way. And if you
Mhm.
marry a thought with emotion and you do it enough times and you repeat it through repetition enough times, your subconscious, you become that person. I
100%.
literally wired myself into being the killer of my little brother. And I played this game for 12 years. So when I'm meeting with Harvey and Harvey said, "It's time to forgive yourself and let it go." And he says, "You're not God. You couldn't have saved him, and you also didn't kill him. You don't have that power." And in that very moment, I got to tell you something. It was a massive relief, but it was the beginning of a process. And that was 33 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And this process is still in place because think about it. How many times do we respond or react to a thought, right? And we respond not and we're not proud of the way we responded. It's not what's going on the outside. It's everything that's going on the inside. Now, for me, it was something I didn't repair. It was something I didn't heal. But and at the end of the day, at the end of that 2-hour meeting, that by the way, that lasted 12 hours, Harvey put me on a 7-day challenge. He says, "Are you willing to take the challenge?" And by the way, I was all in. The reason I was all in is I wanted help. He said, "For the next 7 days, you are not allowed to react or respond to anything in your life." Now, it was the off season. I said, "I can't react or respond." He says, "Nope." He says, "The only thing you can do is go to a journal and document your thoughts and emotions,
So a
right?
guy cuts you off in traffic, you're not allowed to shake your fist at him. You have to say, "Why
I'm
did
not
that
allowed
guy
to
make
tell
me
anyone they're
angry?"
the number one driver in the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not. And if someone tells you you're the number one driver in the world, you're not allowed to emotionally or mentally go on and react or respond. I did this for 7 days. I journaled everything, and every time, and then we went over. Me and Harvey, 7 days later, we went over my journal, and he says, "There's a pattern here." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "The only time you mentally get into a bad place or emotionally get into a bad place is over something you can't control."
Mm.
He goes, "You see, Todd, you're still trying to play God.
Mm.
You're still trying to be the guy that controls everything. And when you can't control a situation, and it probably came from the 12 years where I couldn't control whether my little, and when I took that on, and he goes, those are the times you lose your mind and your emotions."
Mm.
And then we began to build tools to help me get present in the moment. And then every time, and which is why I wrote the book, The Observer. It's like if we observe our thoughts and our emotions and we'll observe our responses, the question is, do you like how you're responding? And if not, that's your journey, that's your mountain for you to overcome. because the door to success swings from the inside out. It's not the outside in. So I
Mhm.
had to fix me. And this is like I always tell people all the time, I'm so flawed, I'm under construction, but I'm getting better every day. I have a new thoughts and new awareness, and I've become the observer of how I think and feel and how I respond and how I react. And it's been for me, it's been a mission, and it's the thing that I teach and try to help people with the most today. So, but ultimately, I look back and as I pivoted through there, and that was a huge pivot in my life. What's crazy is I became a better baseball player.
Mhm.
Like if you look at my statistics from 88 was my first year through 1993, and then you look at my statistics from 94 the rest of my career, you would say like, man, that's not even the same pitcher. That's not the
Mhm.
same guy. And I'm like, exactly right. See, I was rewiring myself to become something different. See, I rewired myself into becoming the killer. So if you can wire yourself into being and creating a negative story, then 100% you can create a positive story. The
Yeah.
problem is most of us are running around with old stories from our past. It could be from the way we grew up, it could be our environments, it could be all those things. It's time to be the creator of the new story. So
Well, and
here we
sometimes
are.
it's at a macro level, but let's just take a picture, right? On the
Mm,
micro level, you're on the mound and some dude just shellacks you into the third deck.
mm.
What starts
Yeah,
happening right away?
yeah,
How do you deal with that? There's nothing you can do about it now. And
yeah.
now you have a new guy to pitch to,
Yeah,
right?
so Harvey used to teach me. He says, "Hey, it doesn't matter what's." He said, "Todd, as soon as the ball leaves your hand, you no longer have any control of what's going to happen. The guy could swing and miss. He could hit it in the third deck. He could hit a double off the wall. The umpire could you could make throw the perfect strike, and he takes it, and the umpire calls it a ball." He goes, "Lots of things are going to happen that are now out of your control." So here was the tool. He says, "The second it leaves your hand." He says the only thought you have once you get the ball back in your hand is, what am I going to do now? What this pitch, this moment, and what am I going to do with it? And if you have any thought outside of that, it's the wrong thought.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a huge Barry Bonds fan, right? I mean, the guy
Mm,
was he's the best of all
awesome.
time.
Best of all time.
He says something very similar. He says, I don't worry about the second baseman, third baseman, outfielders. It's me and the pitcher. But once the ball leaves his hand, it's me and the ball.
Yeah.
He says
Amen.
something
That's right.
very similar. I
Yeah.
am the only one that controls what happens once that ball leaves his hand. It's me
That's
and the ball.
exactly right.
I'm
Yep.
competing against the ball at this point.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
nothing else matters. The fans don't matter. It's bobblehead night. Who cares? I don't know who's coming after me. It doesn't matter what happened in the one before me. And then of course Major League Baseball just made it easy because all the pitchers just walked him. So you didn't have to think about it much. But
Yeah, that's right.
so catch us up how your career ended, what you did after that, and give us the
So
rest
it
of
was
it.
amazing, because I look back on, and I talked about, I started this with how I grew up in the Mantles, the Marises, the four. I stand in the outfield grass with Mickey Mantle during batting practice, and I think about all these extraordinary teammates my father had. Well, I played with Dave Winfield and Paul Muller and Dennis Eckersley and Ozzie Smith and Roberto Alomar and Jack Morris, and I can go on and on. And where are all those guys? Oh yeah, they're in the Hall of Fame. So I was so lucky that I also got surrounded by greatness as teammates. So it was like, for me, it was like having a front row seat to the best people in the world at what they do. How can you not learn something from that? I
Yeah.
was locker mates with Randy Johnson, probably one of the best left-handers of all time. And to watch his daily routines and learn about what he was doing to become that was just an extraordinary. It was just, for me, it was like going to the school my whole life, and my dad's career, his career through Major League Baseball, and then mine. It was like going to the School of Champions. I get to witness the best people in the world at the highest place in that
I think we
profession.
just came up with your next books, Todd, the School of Champions, and just
Yeah.
tell your story, and you could just each chapter could be a different person you learned from or something.
Well, that's why you're the best, boss.
So what happened after your career?
So, what's crazy is, is I was retired at 37 for about 8 months and found myself kind of lost in my way a little bit. It was like, I'd poured everything into my childhood dream. But, as an athlete, everyone has their last day. And, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I hadn't really thought about it before. I loved the markets. My next door neighbor was a director at Merrill Lynch. 8 months into retirement, he says, "Hey, man, you want to do something?" And I said, "Yeah, I just don't know what I'm going to do yet." And he says, "Well, come visit me at the office." I walked out of his office with a job, and I remember telling him, I said, "Hey, man," I said, don't overpay me because I don't know how long I'm going to be here." And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'll give it a shot." And I said, "I'll run with it." But I said, if at the end of the day, it's like, and it's not, I knew I couldn't replace Major League Baseball because that was my life growing up and the whole. So I wasn't looking to replace it, but I was looking for something that could get so passionate about and
Mm,
fall in love with, right? I wanted to do something that I was going to get excited about getting out of bed. That job built a huge asset management team. We raised hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, we had massive success, but I woke up 5 years into that career going, this isn't it.
mm,
And decided to do, and then I launched a hedge fund of all things with a partner that I co-founded with. And 8 months into that journey, I woke up and go, this is not it. This is definitely not it. I felt like I was pitching a game every day and kind of had gotten lost in that space and worked with, and then from there, I was like, you know what? I want to build something. And I got involved in a marketing company and network marketing. I did that for about a decade, and but along the way I was just looking for my next thing. And today I'm really excited, and we have a pokey franchise, Coibito Pokey. We got 10 open stores, 11th on the way, getting ready to sign two more contracts. We're going to franchise, take it to the nation. And I got excited about that, not because I wanted to be in the restaurant business, because I knew nothing about it. The reason I got excited is when I looked at our food line, I said, man, everything comes either from the ocean or a farm. It was actually God's footprint on food that is good for our
mm,
body. And I just got so excited about it. And then we started going, and just like all businesses, harder than you think, takes longer than you think, costs more than you think. Those three things, of course, they've applied, but we've laid one brick at a time. And now, after 6, 7 years, and my kids are involved with me in the business, and look, I'm having the time of my life,
mm,
and then on top of that, I think that along the way, Chris, I got invited to speak on some stages, and along the way, I'm like, oh, I think I found my next Major League Baseball, because I realized that I'm high on life when I'm serving or teaching or coaching or
mm,
helping someone else become the best version of them,
mm,
whether it's to help them in their business, the inside game, to help them as a person. I just find that that is my sweet spot. And it's funny because every time I get away from it, God finds a way to bring me back. He creates an opportunity that I can't say no to. And it's like, and he keeps me bringing me back to that place. So pretty sold out, as you know. You've helped us. You've done a lot of coaching with myself and my wife and developing and putting this together. And we're forever grateful for you for those things, because you are absolutely the master. And it's kind of like I'm on a mission now to see how many people can I help. And my goal and my mission in life now is share all those setbacks with people, because we overcame those setbacks, and
mm,
and and I didn't overcome them. I overcame them because I had a lot of people, a lot of great men around me that helped me overcome. And my mission is how many people can I share my experiences, my ups, my downs, my triumphs and tragedies, and all of those things, where they can gather that information, use it for their benefit. I say I want the top of my head and all of my success that I've ever had in my life to be someone's floor to use as a trampoline to skyrocket to much higher success, and not just success. I want them to be more fulfilled than I've ever been. I want them to have more joy than more happiness and more love. And my problem with from the time my little brother passed over that 12 years is I had no love in my life. The most powerful word in the world I was lacking,
Mm,
and that was love. And I was the one blocking it. I was the one that created the
mm,
story, which is
mm,
why I say it's the lie I told myself. That's the person I became.
mm.
With God's help and God's mercy and God's grace, He's had His work in my life. And one of the things that I've done is just try to turn it all over. And every pastor will tell you, when you say, God, you can take my entire life, you can take my family, you can take my business, you can take every breath. Be careful when you say it because He's going to take it. And it's like, but it's total surrender. And here I am today, and I got goosebumps thinking about it. I'm in a total surrender to my Lord and Savior, the guy that made the greatest sacrifice in the world, that went through all the pain because I'm flawed and because we're all flawed. He decided that he would make the most unbelievable, massive sacrifice, and he would go to the cross so that someday we could reside and be invited back to the table in heaven with him. And like, wow, how powerful is that?
So let's circle back. Tell me that journey. Was your family religious growing up? Was it something that happened in baseball? Who would you meet? Like, what's your story, the
Yeah,
journey
so
there?
we went to church, growing up. I was like every other little kid going to Sunday school and hated to be there.
Did you live in New York or were you out in New
And
Jersey or
all
Connecticut?
different places. So we lived in New Jersey, but it was crazy growing up. We go back to Washington State every year in the winter. We go to Florida in the spring, and then of course New Jersey, New York in the summer. But it was kind of like my battle, and I think it really started at 15, where I knew who God was, and we'd gone to church, but it wasn't like I'm a 15-year-old boy living for Jesus Christ and giving my life up. That was not who I was at the time, I was everything was about me and my pursuits, my goals, my dreams, I ran into a guy in AAA. His name was Don Gordon, and he was a bulldog pitcher on the mound. I loved the way he pitched. Man, he was nasty on that mound. He was the guy leaving Bible study that had given his life up to Christ, and never a curse word came out of his mouth. He lived in this place of peace off the field. But on the mound, man, he was the greatest competitor. And I
Mm,
was like, I love the way he competed. But I seen him have this peace off the field. I didn't have that.
mm,
I didn't have that peace. So he invited me to a Bible study, and then ultimately I gave myself to ask God to come into my heart, and then I was baptized in a swimming pool
mm.
in Syracuse, New York. That was the beginning of my journey. And, I would tell you that in that journey, I weaved left and right probably more than anyone. I had fallen and tried to get back up and stumbled. And it really led me to that meeting with Harvey when Harvey said, "You're not God." And then
Yeah.
I was like, man, I've been trying to control every situation, every conversation, and then I kept getting these reminders. And then I played with a guy by the name of Darren Holmes who played for the New York Yankees under my father, got traded to the Diamondbacks, and in 19 let me think this thing through. In 1999, I had torn my shoulder up. I was going through a divorce. My father was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. Everything off the field was chaos. And with my father being diagnosed, it was almost like, here we go again. This cancer thing keeps showing up in our
Yeah, I
family.
never knew your dad had cancer for a couple decades because he passed in
Yeah, I
what,
mean,
20 or 21, something
it
like
was
that.
just crazy, and I'm
Yeah.
going through all of this chaos off the field. And I remember Darren Holmes said to me, and we became hunting buddies, and we were up in a tent, in a wall tent in Washington. And he said to me, he said, he called me bootleg. He said, "Hey, bootleg." He says, "Let me ask you something." And I always gravitated towards Christian men on the team, but I was,
Mm.
and the Jay Bells of the world, and here I am now with Darren Holmes, and he says to me, he rolled over on his cot, he says, "Hey, bootleg," and I said, "Yeah, man, what's up?" He says, "Man, when are you gonna turn it all over to God and just let it go?"
Oh.
And I said, "I got this." He says, "That's the problem,
Yeah,
bro.
that's the problem. No, you don't.
You don't got this."
Yeah.
He goes, "Man, when are you just gonna turn it over?" And I just kept getting all these unbelievable reminders.
Mm.
And then the craziest thing in the world was we got invited to a church, Living Streams. That pastor that was leading that service ultimately became the guy that married my wife and I.
Mm.
And here's an extraordinary attraction to a guy. And he had lost his son at 16 in the Salt River here in Arizona,
Mm.
and he would share those stories and that pain. And I'm like, man, this pastor shares in the same pain that I've gone through and been through and I still continue to go through. It's the same pain. And I'm like, so me and him became like really, really close friends. And that was the true march, my true march to surrendering and just living all out for God. So it was long after my career. And, I had lots of reminders along the way. It's funny. It's like, God goes through all the storms with you, whether you know it or not. He's in that storm with you. And in all those storms, he'd always send someone to come see me, and it would last for a moment until the next storm, and then he would send someone else, and it was kind of like, I'm just so grateful that God never gave up on me,
Yeah.
man, because I would have been easy to give up on, because I was falling in and out all along the way. And the second, something would start to go good, what would happen is I would get in the way again. And it
Mm.
would be like, man, look how good I am and look what I've done. And it's like, and what I realized today, man, it's like the littlest things now I find myself saying, "Thank you, Jesus," all day long.
Hmm.
Literally all day long. Every little thing that bothers, I'll be like, "Oh man, thank you, Jesus." And today I have a prayer. And it's very simple. And my prayer every morning is, all right. And I talk to God like he's my buddy. He's like, and I would say, man, get authentic with it, right? And sometimes I'll say to Jesus, I say, all right, bro. I'd say, listen, you know me. So here, based on how well you know me, I love to compete. I believe I can win. I said, but here's what I need. I need help. I need you to slam the doors in my face, the ones you don't want me to walk through. And the ones you want me to walk through, I want you to open them up and make it so easy for me to walk through that I know it is you that is guiding, because you know how I am. You know I won't quit. You know I'll just keep going. And I said, I'm tired of that story. So will you do me a favor, Lord? Will you slam the door in my face and keep me from walking through some of those doors? By the way, I've been saying this prayer for a while, and it is unbelievable how many times he tries to open the door up for me, coaching, serving, guiding, speaking, and trying to help other people.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he sent a lot of people along my way, Chris. I remember I went to Robin Sharma invited me on his stage. He interviewed me. He texts me when I'm done. I'm back in the audience. He says, "Will you come see me backstage?" And he says, "Todd, you need to go share this with the world." But what's funny is all along, it's almost like I've had the insecurity of being bold and sharing some of those things, right? It's like wondering, is this the right message? Wondering, is this the right thing? And now I'm so locked in I built a program that is all about raising your identity and the five pillars that our thoughts, our emotions, words, associations, and actions are going to land us where we are, and it's also going to propel us or keep us from going where we need to go. And and a lot of it is about conscious, being present in the moment, and being grateful for the gift of this breath and the gift of this day. And it's also about rewiring our responses that need to be rewired, because let's face it, we're not all responding the way we're proud to respond.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just really appreciate you joining us. Folks, Todd is one of the founding members, along with me, of the Royal Table. We are opening it back up on October 1st for more men to join. We only open it up 4 times. We've got a great founding members group. We're getting to know each other now. We're creating that brotherhood, all those kinds of things. But if you go to royaltable.org, you can put your name on the waiting list and you'll be the first to know, so you can register when we come up for it in October, on October 1st. But Todd, thank you so much. Appreciate you, buddy. You're a good, dear friend of mine, you and your wife, and we love you to death. And your story is amazing. And I just see it in you that you're taking those amazing stories, not for you just to rest your laurels on, but how can I take what I've learned and help other people? And that's
Yeah,
that's
man.
just so admirable.
And I want to say thanks, man. And I want to say I remember when you sent me, you know, kind of your some vision and stuff around the royal table, and I was like, man, that's exactly what I need right now.
Mm,
And then I thought, when I said that to myself, I'm like, no, that's what we need all the time.
yeah,
We need as men, doesn't matter. And by the way, of all walks of life, it doesn't matter how much success you're having today.
yeah,
We all need good Christian men holding us accountable, growing together, helping one another out. It doesn't matter where you're at on that mountain.
yeah.
We all need that circle. So I'm just grateful that you put this together, because it's kind of like, it's like I always say, man, is how do we level up? And I know one thing, Chris, anytime I'm around you, I just feel like my spirit is leveled up. I'm leveled up as a human being,
I
and
feel the same way about you, my
and
friend.
I just appreciate you so much.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's Todd Stottlemyre. Be sure to share this, hit the likes, all those kinds of things, and jump on over to royaltable.org. Todd Stottlemyre, thanks for joining us today.
You're the best, boss. Thank
See
you.
ya. Bye bye.